Welcome, Wargamers, to the enlightened magical realm of Hysh, because today we are unpacking Arcane Cataclysm. This is the newest two-player set brought to us by Games Workshop, which features the Lumineth Realm Lords versus the Disciples of Tzeentch, two factions that it seems are getting new battle tomes on the horizon. No ETA on those from me, but this is a great set with a bunch of awesome models. I wanted to say a big thank you to Games Workshop for sending me an early copy, and today we're going to talk about the lore behind Arcane Cataclysm. There we go. Professional quality YouTubing is what you come here for, folks. So we're going to talk about why these forces are where they are, what brings them to battle, and really kind of set up the overall story arc of this box set. Now keep in mind, it is like it's meant to be, played by two players, and so there isn't really a hard outcome because you and your opponent are meant to decide it. But that being said, there are some cool lore tidbits along the way that I think that you would like to hear about. Now, before we jump into all of that, I just want to give a quick shout out. If you're interested in this box, you want to get your hands on one yourself at a low rate, go ahead and check out Not Just Gaming in my affiliate link description down below. You're going to save quite a bit on all of your Games Workshop product purchases, as well as support me as a content creator, and I could not thank you enough for using that link. It's massive for me and my family and providing for all of us, so thank you so much for anyone who has used it before. So before we jump truly into Arcane Cataclysm, let's give a little bit of background, because really we need to know a bit about the Lumineth before this story really clicks with us. The most important thing to understand is the events of the Spire fall. This is essentially while the Age of Chaos was raging across all the other realms, Hysh, for at least some portion of time, was actually relatively safe. At least from direct chaotic influence. They were in danger, however, of falling to that old elven disease known as arrogance. See, things were safe, and yet the inner, hubris and competitive nature of elves kind of took hold in that peace and quiet, so to speak. So they began studying deeper magics, trying to have more powerful weapons than their neighbor, or defenses, rather. I mean, I likened it on a podcast I was a guest on, The Mortal Realms, which you should check out. That imagine you have two neighbors, one of them puts up a nice new fence, and so the other, needing to compensate, puts up, a massive security fence with barbed wire and everything. And then his neighbor, who had the nice fence originally, installs turret systems and stuff, and you just kind of keep going back and forth. Everyone's trying to outdo each other until you reach a point of critical mass where you start bringing, nuclear weapons involved. Like, it just gets ridiculous. So the Spire Fall as an event is a time period where things fell apart because all of these prideful, arrogant elves unleashed all these things that they had been creating. Again, there wasn't like an enemy there. They kind of just turned, and society fell apart under the weight of its own arrogance. These weapons were of such volatile nature that they actually exploded and ripped open tears of reality and allowed demons from the realm of chaos to pour in. And that is actually how demons got into the realm of Hysh en masse. All across the realm, these massive explosions were happening because of the Spire Fall, and in that moment when the line between worlds was thin, demons just poured in. Now, of course, since then, Teclis has appeared, and they've basically sewn up all of these rens in reality with giant runes of power and all these kinds of things, and that's how we have the Lumineth Realm Lords that we know today. If you are interested in learning more about them, I did a full series on them, but essentially they're going around the mortal realms trying to close any, open gateway for chaos to spill in, trying to heal the setting. And so now we're going to fast forward, right? We're past the Age of Chaos, now we're in the Age of Sigmar, Teclis is back, the Lumineth Realm Lords now exist as a complete faction, they got Hysh largely under control, but in one small city within the realm of Hysh, known as Quintessence, a rot is forming. Quintessence is a city of order, but in its, kind of darkened alleyways, a cult of Tzeentch has taken root. A creature known as Venestradi, which is a Curseling, I'll talk about more what that means in here in a second, has basically received some intel that there are a cache of these old forgotten Lumineth Realm Lord weapons, meaning from the days of the Age of Myth when the Spire Fall happened, some of those nukes didn't go off and they've been buried and forgotten. So he's gotten information about where some of those might be, and so the cult itself began this like huge Machiavellian plan to go get those weapons. Now let's pause the story there and talk about our protagonist here, the Curseling. So the Curseling is not a singular person, it's a role or an affliction, some might say, where a normal dedicated person to Tzeentch will start having this weird growth on their body, and it's almost like a familiar grows out of their body rather than being like a separate creature, like a bird or something like that we see in other stories. These creatures call themselves Trechlets, and essentially, when you look at the Curseling model, you have your standard Tzeentchian warrior with this little, like, mini-me half-twin coming out of him, and he's whispering secrets about the universe. I mean, anything. Events to happen, things that have happened in the past. This one in particular is whispering about the location of these massive weapons, and so Venestrati, our leader, gets his cult together and makes a plan. And the plan is a simple one. Upcoming soon, there is a festival known as Sigmar's Day, or Sigmar Fest, and so when everyone is drunk and partying, the cult of Tzeentch, known as the Sons of Quintessence, are going to slip out of the city, hop on a boat, cross a little bit of water, all of a sudden we're going to end up at this great place where all these weapons are here. Perfect. In and out, no problem. We'll come back when everyone's walking off their hangover. Sigmar's Day comes. Now I asked this question on the Mortal Realms podcast, and I'm going to ask you guys to leave it in the comments. What is your Sigmar's Day food? I say schnitzel because Sigmar is German. That's my opinion. Leave yours in the comments down below. But back to our story. The Tzeentch cult slips out, again, Sons of Quintessence. It's a mix of Karak acolytes. They got some beastmen in there, the Zangor, rather. And of course our Curseling leader. They slip out of the city, but they are noticed by a Lumineth Realm Lord hero known as an Enlightener. Her name is Denezia War Widow, and she is frickin' awesome. She also has a twin known as Liathu, that's how I'm going to pronounce it anyway. Essentially, if you don't know, some of the Lumineth have the ability to produce, like, they call them simulacrums, so twins. They can split their essence in half and create a perfect copy of themselves that can live independently. Now, Teclis, in the Age of Sigmar, has put a decree out that you can only ever have one simulacrum, meaning one clone. However, that was not the case always, and we'll get into why that's important later on. But so now we have two Cenarian Lighteners, Denezia and Liathu, pursuing our Sons of Quintessence cult. And I'm going to kind of yada 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 a little bit because there's a little bit of story that's just like, whoa, there's not people usually in this area. It's like, it's not really important information. Essentially, the cult makes it off of Zintiel, the major landmass there, and they're headed over to the continent of Iliatha. There's actually a great map in the book that kind of details out their journey. They're headed east, essentially, if you're looking at the map from below, although this is more accurately, you could say, from Quintessence, they're headed like realm outward, right? Rather than inward towards the center of the realm, they're headed outward. Along the way, they pass a few locations that I'll just kind of give shout outs to. One of them is a city called Tor Katais, or Katis, something like that. It was important for getting some direction and bearing on where the Sons of Quintessence were headed. And then there is a location called the Henorai Seal, which is also important because this is a location where Teclis mended reality, essentially. If you were to look from the sky downward at Hysh, you would notice a whole bunch of lettering all across the top of it, and that's literally like the gateway that keeps demons out. Along this journey, Denezia's twin, Liathu, is struck down rather, I'm going to say, non-dramatically. It was kind of like she just got punked really, really quickly. And you're like, well, that was strange. All right, we're going to move right on. And our chase ends at the many tombs of Sarandua. To put it very, very briefly, Sarandua was a powerful high elf, for lack of a better word, back in the Age of Myth, created many of those fantastical weapons that we mentioned at the top of this episode, was a brutal tyrant, and was known to clone herself up to 18 times or something like that. It was just a ridiculous number, like, just wanted power and control, and so this collection of tombs is for her and all of her various dead selves, again, clones, along with a cache of weapons and powerful artifacts. Now, the story gets a little strange here because at this point, this is when you start getting into the missions that you and your opponents play together. So rather than hard details, you're kind of piecing things together based on the battle plans and the little descriptors they have there. But I'm just going to pause here because it's a great way to say this is our how and why, right? What brought these two factions together was the sins of the Lumineth Realm Lords past and the opportunism of Tzeentchian cultists, which I think are both individually fantastic stories, and I love this. When you look at these things, like, there's not a ton of like new information in any of these two-player boxes, but what I love is if you look at any battle tome from Age of Sigmar, right, no matter what army, if you look at the timeline section of it towards the front, it has these little stories that are like maybe one paragraph long max, and they just give you a little flavor of like different encounters and things that had happened. The way that I look at these two-player battle box sets that aren't the main starter ones like Dominion is that somebody took one of those little paragraph long stories and blew it up into an entire narrative complete with missions. You can do this on your own, but this is a great kind of picture of that. Two factions for their own benefit, whether one is like to cover up, mistakes of the past, and the other one to seize opportunities for the future, are converging on this place. And I just love it, because when you and your opponent are playing a game, the how and the why of how you got there and why you're fighting it just sets the tone. No matter what kind of game you want to play, it's always fun to just kind of come up with a little story. But anyway, back to our tale. So now we're in the tombs of Sarandua, and essentially the first mission is both of you just scouring the remains and rubble for anything while you duke it out. The second mission sees the disciples of Tzeentch finding what is at least partially their prize, an artifact known as a Realm Shatter Prison, or Prism, P-R-I-S-M, which is a really cool thing that essentially destabilizes magic in its own given area. Very Tzeentchy sounding, and it seems like it's more of an amplifier of magical and arcane power than a direct weapon itself. Right? It's not the bomb, but it's maybe a source of energy and combustion and that kind of thing. And then our story ends with a mission rightfully called Arcane Duel, and this is where the Lumineth Realm Lords and the Disciples of Tzeentch use all the models in their collection, bring them to the battlefield, and then just duke it out. And it's really cool because to represent the Realm Shatter Prism's effect, they actually deleted the entire way magic works in this thing and went back to 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles. I'm not going to go too much detail on how they did it. Go read it for yourself. But it's a cool little tidbit and a throwback to the past. And all we know at that point is that the story ends with those two duking it out. However, there is a little tidbit in the very, very last page underneath the pitched battle profiles. The heroes and villains of our story are all having their big, their monologue moments, as you would expect from any given Warhammer media. And we learn through this dialogue that Denezia Warwidow actually reveals herself to be Sarandua the 18th. Now, this is an interesting development, okay? The reason I say it's interesting is because there's a lot of allusions in this story to the ability for Lumineth to have twins, or to copy themselves, rather. But it's never, it's just never brought forward that some of those old Lumineth from, the Age of Myth, when the Spire fall happened, might still be alive. And so we're standing in the tombs of 1 through 5, essentially, and then she left because she knew that she needed to basically put that old name to bed to have a new start in the new Age of Sigmar. And then when she found out someone was going to her tombs to raid her plunders, she was like, oh heck no, and then she just chased after them. This also means that the character that died earlier, her sister, would have been, Sarandua number 6 through 17, something like that. And that there are, by that logic, many more of her out there. So fittingly, for a box that has Tzeentch in it, it has a huge twist at the end, and I love it. I would love to see stories that feature high elves, or elves rather, that just exist for so long that they have lived full lives that have become myth and legend. Now, like I said, this is a 2-player starter set. It's not going to have a resolution like other boxes do. So that's what we get. They're having this big fight. She reveals herself and casts a huge fireball at him, and that's pretty much where the story ends. Who wins that fight is completely up to you and your opponent. And so that's the story. Let's kind of divert and do what we always do with these videos and talk about why is it cool. First off, there are some fantastic matchup and parodies when it comes to these two forces. For example, both have a very strong magical leaning in their names, right? Tzeentch is all about magic, so are the Lumineth, of course. We also see a lot of focus on twins as a trope. For example, the Curseling has a second part of him growing out of himself, right? The two are bound as one. Just as we meet Denezia and her sister are bound as one. Now, of course, we learn later on that there's many of her, Sarandua, but that's not the point. The entire time of the story, we're seeing these twins reflected upon one another, casting magic at one another. We honestly got to explore Hysh a little bit, and I always enjoy doing that because it seems like such a fun and interesting realm because there's so much history there that is still very, very relevant. Again, weapon caches, all kinds of tutelages, there's warbands running around, there's rifts in reality. It's just such a fascinating place to explore. It was like a mini version of Forbidden Power when all of these storm vaults across the realms were revealed, but this is just a very particular one where one person knows where her own clones' graves are and is like, I know where they're headed, and chases after them. So it's like a mini version of it, but I like it a lot. And overall, for giving forces a reason to be where they are, meaning in Hysh, in this tomb of all things, you have characters that are relevant and you care about them. We didn't talk about a side character that is essentially a Zangor leader that gives the Curseling a whole bunch of intel and information that's really great. There's also shout-outs to other various Lumineth characters that were prominent in the Broken Realms series, just passing by or giving some advice here and there. So it ties and fits well into the established setting without really pushing anything forward or defocusing Gur in any way. This is just, again, a little one-paragraph tidbit blown up into a battle box. But, of course, the main focus is still over in Gur, which this set has absolutely nothing to do with. Someone asked me, like, well, what's the consequences of this set with Gur, or what does it mean for Tzeentch? Nothing. Nothing. It's isolated, it's completely a one-off thing, and this box will go away. If you want it, buy it. But it doesn't impact the main story of Age of Sigmar whatsoever. Which, honestly, I love. I love when there's little stories that don't have to have sweeping, massive consequences. It's a tale of two warbands fighting. And what is Warhammer if not that? But anyway, friends, those are my thoughts on Arcane Cataclysm. I think it's a great set. If you have any interest in either of those armies, it's a great thing to pick up and get for expanding your collection. If you do not have any interest in either army, don't get it. Just don't get it, that's all. Wait for a battle box that has an army you're interested in. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story. What are some things you found interesting? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will chat with you there. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in my next Age of Sigmar Wargaming video. Happy Wargaming.